Picture this.
This is a sperm whale, and it's moving. It's running. It's running away, and not from a pod of orcas, not from some giant sea monster, and not even from humans. It's running from this thing? This is the pilot whale, and compared to the giant behemoth running away from it, they are way smaller, way weaker, and honestly, kind of goofy looking. Even killer whales, animals that kill other whales, will flee when they hear the calls of a pilot whale. It doesn't matter if they're with their pod. It doesn't matter if they're twice their size. They will run. But why are the deadliest creatures on Earth running from a really weird shaped chunk of blubber? Well, I know what you're all thinking. What even is a pilot whale? Well, if you just look at a picture of one, you probably wouldn't assume this is the animal terrorizing the ocean's deadliest predators. They have these big, bulbous foreheads, a permanent little smirk on their face, and they honestly just look like a slightly goofy, oversized beluga. Basically, a giant floating eggplant. And because they're technically in the dolphin family, people hear the word dolphin and immediately think of friendly animals that do flips at theme parks and want to play with humans. Or at least, that's what SeaWorld wants you to think. But the dolphin family is a lot more violent than people realize. Orcas are actually dolphins, and pilot whales are the second largest oceanic dolphin in the world, right behind the orca. Males can reach up to 20 feet long and weigh nearly 3 tons. So right away, you can forget the cute sea puppy image. This is a massive predator, but being big doesn't automatically make you capable of scaring off a pod of orcas. There are plenty of huge animals in the ocean that orcas have absolutely no problem killing.
So what exactly are they doing that has the orca swimming for its life?
Well, to understand why the ocean is actually afraid of them, we have to look at what they do when they get hungry. A lot of dolphins hunt fish near the surface, which is relatively easy. You find a school of fish, you trap them, and you eat them. Pilot whales don't do that. Pilot whales hunt squid, and not just the small squid near the surface. They hunt deep sea squid, which means they have to dive into the pitch black ocean, sometimes reaching depths of over 3,000 feet. Once you go down to 3,000 feet, it gets dark. Fast. The water is freezing, and the pressure is intense enough to just crush you. So, a really great place to grab a quick snack. But the biggest problem with hunting squid in the deep ocean is that squid are fast. They're pure muscle, and when they want to escape, they can shoot through the water at incredible speeds. So, if you're a mammal that breathes air, and you want to catch a high-speed squid 3,000 feet underwater, you can't just slowly cruise around and hope you bump into one. You have to be able to sprint. And that's exactly what pilot whales do. They hold their breath, dive straight down into the dark, locate a squid using echolocation, and then just sprint. This requires a ridiculous amount of oxygen and massive muscle output. They're pushing their bodies to the absolute limit just to get a single meal, and then they have to swim all the way back up to the surface before they drown, which, as an air-breathing mammal, is genuinely frowned upon. So you have an animal that's built to sprint in pitch black water. That's impressive, but what happens when they actually run into the ocean's real apex predator? Scientists have actually managed to record these interactions using underwater hydrophones, and the results are honestly kind of shocking. Orcas are usually incredibly vocal. They're constantly clicking, squeaking, and talking to each other while they hunt or travel. They're loud because they know nothing is going to attack them. But researchers noticed that when the calls of pilot whales start showing up on the acoustic monitors, the orcas do something very strange. They go completely silent. They stop communicating. They drop whatever they're hunting, and they immediately turn around and start swimming in the exact opposite direction. And they're not taking their time about it. And not just, oh, I think I'll go hunt somewhere else today. They're running for their lives. Researchers have tracked orcas swimming at high speed for miles just to make sure they get as far away from the pilot whales as possible. The orcas are treating the pilot whales like a genuine, lethal threat. But why? Orcas kill great white sharks for fun. They drown blue whales. Why are they running away from a dolphin with a big forehead? Well, the answer comes down to how pilot whales react to danger. Most animals in the ocean have a very simple defense mechanism when they see an orca. They run. Or, if they're too slow to run, they group up and try to form a defensive wall. Sperm whales will form a circle with their tails pointing out to protect their babies. Pilot whales don't play defense. If a pilot whale senses an orca nearby, there's no running away. There are no defensive circles. And they don't do this alone. Pilot whales live in massive pods. While orcas usually travel in smaller family groups of maybe 5 to 15 individuals, pilot whales travel in armies. A typical pod can have anywhere from 20 to 100 whales, and sometimes multiple pods will merge together into superpods of several hundred. So when an orca accidentally wanders into pilot whale territory, it isn't just facing one aggressive dolphin. It's suddenly getting charged by 50 to 100 massive animals that are all sprinting directly at it with the sole intention of driving it out of the area. They'll relentlessly harass, ram, and chase the orcas until they completely leave the territory. It's pure mob violence. Nature is beautiful, isn't it? But realistically, if an orca actually turned around and fought back, who would win? If you just look at them side by side, the orca has every single physical advantage. A fully grown male orca can weigh up to 6 tons, which is double the weight of a male pilot whale. The orca has a mouth that looks like, well, this, which means anything it bites is going to get absolutely shredded. The pilot whale has much smaller teeth designed for grabbing slippery squid. In a strict one-on-one fight, the orca is going to win easily. It's not even a contest. But the ocean isn't a one-on-one arena. In the wild, an orca has to constantly calculate risk versus reward. Yes, the orca is bigger and stronger, but if it turns around to fight, it's going to be fighting 50 animals at the exact same time. Even if the orca manages to kill a few of them, it's absolutely going to take damage in the process. It's going to get rammed, it's going to get bitten, and it's going to get exhausted. And in the wild, taking damage means you're probably gonna die. If an orca gets its jaw broken or a fin permanently damaged, it won't be able to hunt anymore, and it will slowly starve to death. There's zero benefit for an orca to fight a swarm of angry pilot whales. They aren't trying to eat the pilot whales, so there's no food reward. It's entirely risk with zero payoff. So the orca does the only logical thing it can do. It runs. Because as smart as an orca is, it knows how to do basic math. And 50 against 1 is a really bad time. But the physical swarming is only half the nightmare. They actually have a much weirder and honestly way more psychological way of fighting. They use sound. Underwater, sound doesn't just act like background noise. Because water is so dense, sound travels over 4 times faster than it does in the air. And it literally hits you. When pilot whales decide to attack, they aren't sneaking up on you. They scream. They produce intense screams that are designed to disorientate and intimidate whatever they're charging at. And it actually gets crazier than that. Researchers have recorded pilot whales actively mimicking the specific calls of orcas. We don't know exactly why they do this, but the leading theory is that they're basically using the orca's own language against them. Imagine you're an orca, swimming in the dark, and suddenly you hear the exact language your family uses coming from the darkness ahead of you. You might pause, thinking it's another orca pod. And then, before you can figure out what's going on, the mimicry stops, the screaming starts, and 50 pilot whales come rushing out of the dark straight towards you.
It's basically the ocean's version of a horror movie jump scare.
They use their intelligence to confuse the predator, and then they use their numbers to overwhelm it. Okay, so they can bully orcas, but orcas are roughly the same size as them. What happens when they run into something much, much bigger? Because they actually share these exact same waters with the largest toothed predator on Earth, the sperm whale. They can reach 60 feet long and weigh up to 50 tons. They're absolute monsters of the deep, and they also happen to hunt deep sea squid, which means they hunt in the exact same areas as pilot whales. You'd think that a 3-ton pilot whale would look at a 50-ton sperm whale and decide to just leave it alone. The size difference is ridiculous. A normal animal would look at that and say,
"Yeah, I'm good."
But obviously, pilot whales don't care. Marine biologists have documented pilot whales actively mobbing and harassing sperm whales. And the craziest part? They're doing it to literally steal their food. This is a behavior called Kleptoparasitism. The sperm whale will do all the hard work of diving down, fighting a giant squid, and bringing it up towards the surface. And right as the sperm whale is trying to eat, a massive pod of pilot whales will swarm it, screaming and ramming into the much larger whale until it gets so annoyed that it drops the squid and leaves. Then the pilot whales just eat the squid. They're literally bullying the largest predator on the planet into giving up its food. So at this point, you have to ask, why are they like this? Why go out of your way to pick fights with the deadliest and largest animals in the ocean? Why not just quietly avoid orcas like every other normal animal does? Well, this extreme aggression is actually a survival strategy based entirely on how they hunt. Remember, adult pilot whales have to dive thousands of feet deep to catch a squid. But baby pilot whales cannot do that. Their lungs aren't developed enough, and they can't hold their breath long enough to survive the deep dives. So when the adults go down to hunt, the calves have to stay up near the surface. And the surface of the open ocean is basically the worst place in the world to leave a baby. It's completely exposed, and it's actively patrolled by oceanic white-tipped sharks, great white sharks, and of course, orcas. If the adults just quietly hid whenever an orca came around, the orca would eventually find the babies at the surface and eat them. So, evolution gave the pilot whales a very simple solution. The best defense is a completely unhinged offense. If you violently attack everything that moves, nothing can eat your kids. Flawless logic. By aggressively attacking and chasing away literally anything that enters their territory, the pilot whales ensure that a predator never even gets close enough to realize there are babies nearby. They create a violently enforced safe zone around their pod. So, knowing all of this, what would actually happen if you jumped into the water with a hunting pod of pilot whales? Well, the good news for all you Beyond the Blue viewers out there is that pilot whales don't view humans as food. They eat squid, and you don't look or move anything like a squid. Well, unless you're wearing a really weird wetsuit. But genuinely, they aren't going to look at you and decide to eat you. But that doesn't mean you're safe. These are animals that weigh thousands of pounds, and they're darting around at high speeds, communicating with intense bursts of sound, and aggressively defending their space. You're just in the way. If you get in their way, or if they decide that your presence is annoying them, you're going to get physically rammed, and getting headbutted by a 3-ton animal moving at 20 miles an hour is going to do a lot of damage. There are actual reports of scuba divers getting too close to pilot whales and getting grabbed by the leg and dragged deep underwater before being let go. It's basically their way of saying,
Get out of my house.
You wouldn't get eaten, but you'd very quickly realise that you're completely powerless in their environment. But to really understand how they coordinate all of this chaos, we have to look at the one thing holding it all together. Why are they called pilot whales? It actually comes from early observations by fishermen and whalers, who noticed something very specific about how these pods move. The entire group of 50 to 100 whales will always blindly follow a single leader, the pilot. Pilot whale society is entirely matriarchal. The pod is usually led by an older female, and this leader dictates absolutely everything the pod does. She decides when they dive, she decides when they travel, and she decides when they attack. The social bonds inside a pilot whale pod are basically unbreakable. They share food with each other, they babysit each other's calves, and they stay with their mothers for their entire lives. They're so tightly bonded that they essentially function as a single organism. When the leader moves, everybody moves. There's no debate, there's no hesitation. And this is exactly why their mobbing tactics are so effective against orcas. Because they move as one perfectly synchronized unit, they can overpower much larger predators with pure aggression. But in biology, extreme loyalty usually comes with a massive, fatal catch. Because whenever you have a group that relies entirely on one single thing, you have created a massive vulnerability. If a pod of 100 whales relies entirely on the decision making of one single leader, what happens if that leader makes a mistake? What happens if the matriarch gets sick, or gets an infection in her brain, or gets disorientated by military sonar? If the leader gets confused and accidentally swims into shallow water, the rest of the pod doesn't stop and realize it's a bad idea. They don't have independent decision making when it comes to navigation. Their instinct to stay with the pod is stronger than their instinct to survive individually. So if the leader swims onto a beach, everybody else swims onto the beach too. Which, for an animal that physically requires the ocean to survive, is a pretty massive problem. And when this goes wrong, it goes really wrong. Pilot whales are notorious for being the species most frequently involved in mass strandings. And this isn't just a case of 2 or 3 whales getting lost. Entire pods, dozens, sometimes hundreds of pilot whales will beach themselves at the exact same time. When this happens, humans usually rush in to try and save them. Volunteers will spend hours pouring water over them, keeping them cool, and waiting for the high tide so that they can physically push the whales back out into the deep water. But the most heartbreaking part of a pilot whale stranding is what happens after you push them back into the ocean. If the sick or disorientated leader is still stuck on the beach, or if the pod can hear the distress calls of the whales that are still stranded, the whales that just got rescued will literally turn around and swim right back onto the sand. They refuse to leave their family. Even if it means suffocating under their own weight on a beach, their instincts simply won't allow them to abandon their pod. They'd literally rather die than survive alone in the ocean. It's a devastating flaw. The exact same social bonding that makes them brave enough to charge a pod of orcas is the exact same thing that can wipe out hundreds of them in a single afternoon. So when you look at the pilot whale, this is basically what happens when you maximize social loyalty above absolutely everything else. On one hand, they've created an animal that's essentially untouchable. They can sprint into the abyss to hunt high-speed squid. They can steal food from 50-ton sperm whales. And they can force the deadliest apex predator in the history of the entire ocean to turn around and flee in total silence. They're the undisputed bullies of the open ocean, purely because they refuse to back down and they always fight together. But an advantage like this always comes with a cost. The price for being the most fearless mob in the ocean is the complete loss of individual survival instinct. Their strength is their weakness. They're completely invincible together, but entirely helpless alone. If the leader wins, they all win. But if the leader fails, they all fail. But as long as the matriarch knows where she's going, the pilot whale will remain one of the only animals that even the orca refuses to mess with. But honestly, considering they're perfectly fine with headbutting a 50-ton sperm whale, I think I'll just stick to watching them from a very safe distance. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please keep leaving your suggestions in the comments for future videos, because I actually do read them and it helps me figure out what to cover next. And if you want to see our full video about the orca, the apex predator that actually runs away from these guys, check out this video here. Also, if you haven't seen my second channel yet, Beyond the Green, make sure to check that out too. It's similar stuff, just outside the water.